Surrounded by enemies, the alien princess refused to surrender or flee. The sky was usually a serene canvas of pale violet and gold at this hour, but today it was filled with shapes that made her heart skip a beat. A fleet of starships hovered silently in the distance, their surfaces gleaming like shards of glass under the twin suns. They moved in precise formations, not one ship out of line, and yet their sheer number was enough to make even the most confident advisors uneasy. Leora's advisors were already whispering amongst themselves, their faces pale, their hands restless. The court had never seen anything like this. The humans they had encountered on distant missions were unpredictable but rarely posed a threat on this scale. These ships, however, radiated something different. It was not anger or aggression in the usual sense. There was order, purpose, and an overwhelming aura of unfamiliar intelligence. "Your Highness," said Minister Darrell, stepping close to her. His voice trembled slightly. "They are here, and we do not know why. We should consider evacuating or at least sending a message of surrender. We cannot risk a confrontation with a force this incomprehensible." Leora turned to him, her eyes steady and calm. She was young, only 22 by Zyphoran standards, but she carried herself with a confidence that surpassed most seasoned diplomats. "Minister, do not confuse fear with wisdom," she replied softly. "We do not know their intent, and assuming hostility may blind us to opportunity. Sometimes the first step is to observe, not to flee." Darrell's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The princess's words were always carefully measured, a balance of courage and clarity that few could argue against. She turned her gaze back to the fleet, letting her mind absorb every detail. The ships were not moving aggressively toward the planet. Instead, they maintained a pattern that almost seemed ceremonial. Leora noticed the small flicker of lights along their edges. There was rhythm to them, a language of sorts, perhaps even a greeting that her people had yet to understand. "How many ships do you think they are?" asked a young aide, barely containing her curiosity. "Enough to make a statement," Leora said thoughtfully. "But numbers alone do not define power. Watch how they move. Watch how they communicate." The aide blinked, unsure what to make of the princess's calm demeanor. For most, the natural response to such an overwhelming display of technology would be panic. But Leora had always seen the world differently. She was fascinated by puzzles, patterns, and the hidden connections between seemingly unrelated events. The fleet was a puzzle, and she intended to solve it. In the council chamber, discussions grew louder. Ministers argued about defenses, resources, and possible retreats. Some suggested hiding the planet's most valuable knowledge, while others demanded a signal of surrender to prevent conflict. Leora listened, but she did not interrupt. Instead, she allowed the noise to fill the room until it faded into background static. Then she spoke. "We will not surrender," she said firmly. "We will not flee. We will meet them on our own terms, but we will do so with intelligence, with observation, and with understanding. Fear is not our guide." Her words were met with silence, followed by a few hesitant nods. Even the most skeptical advisors could not deny the truth in them. To surrender without knowing intent was weakness. To flee would be cowardice. To act wisely and boldly, that was leadership. Later that evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, the fleet remained in orbit. Leora requested a private meeting with the lead envoy of the Zyphoran Observation Corps. Commander Thale, a veteran of planetary defense, entered her chamber with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly, "we have monitored their movements. They are precise, unlike anything we have encountered. There is no immediate threat, yet their presence is overwhelming. How do you wish to proceed?" Leora considered his question. "Observation first," she said finally. "Study their patterns, their lights, their energy signatures. Note what is repeated, what is unique. Sometimes the truth is hidden in the details." Thale nodded, though he could not hide his skepticism. "And if they do intend harm, then we will respond," she said simply. "But we will do so with knowledge, not panic, and for now we watch and learn." For the next several hours, Leora remained on the balcony, watching the fleet. She noticed how their formations shifted subtly, almost like dancers moving to a silent rhythm. She saw patterns in the lights along their hulls, sequences that seemed deliberate. She began to sketch them in her mind, imagining them as a kind of language, a code waiting to be deciphered. As night fell over Xiphora, the stars blended with the alien lights, creating a scene both terrifying and beautiful. Leora felt a strange sense of calm. The world around her was full of uncertainty, but in uncertainty there was opportunity. She was determined to find it. The next morning, she invited the head linguist and a small team of scientists to the palace. Together, they began analyzing the fleet's light patterns. Using simple algorithms and intuitive reasoning, Leora suggested correlations between the flickers and positions, testing hypotheses that no one else had considered. While her team focused on calculations, she observed, imagining the aliens' thought process. Perhaps they were trying to communicate in a form that required patience and insight, not force. Word spread quickly among the court. People began to admire Leora's calm determination. Where fear had once ruled, curiosity now grew. Children came to watch her from a distance, inspired by the princess who refused to flee even when faced with the unknown. Merchants, scholars, and citizens alike gathered in the plazas to speculate on the fleet, sharing stories of the princess who faced the stars with steady eyes. In the palace gardens, Leora walked slowly among the flowering Xiphoran plants, thinking about the aliens. Unlike most beings she had studied, these creatures were not easy to read. They were neither cruel nor chaotic, but their order was intimidating. And yet she saw a spark of something familiar: intelligence. Perhaps, she thought, intelligence could be a bridge rather than a weapon. By midday, preliminary patterns had emerged. Leora shared her insights with her team. "Look for repetition, not just in the lights but in timing and distance," she instructed. "If we can understand even a fragment of their intent, we gain an advantage. Knowledge is power, but curiosity is strength." The linguist nodded, impressed by her clarity. "Your Highness, you are seeing things no one else would even consider." Leora smiled. "That is because I am willing to look, not because I am unafraid." As the day progressed, she noticed a small anomaly in the fleet's movement, a slight pause at regular intervals, almost as if the ships were acknowledging her observation. She pointed it out to her team. "See. They are responding, not with aggression but with awareness. We are not invisible to them." The team worked tirelessly, decoding sequences and testing hypotheses. Leora remained at the center, guiding them with a balance of patience and intuition. She encouraged questions, celebrated small breakthroughs, and reminded them to look beyond fear. By the time night returned, the fleet had not advanced toward Xiphora. Instead, they hovered in formation, their lights dancing like a silent symphony in the sky. Leora felt a quiet satisfaction. They were not enemies, not yet. They were unknown, and that was a challenge she could meet. As she prepared for bed, she reflected on the day. The people of Xiphora were counting on her to protect them, not just with strategy but with wisdom. She understood that leadership was not about avoiding danger, but about embracing the unknown with courage and insight. The fleet above was a test, and she intended to pass, not by surrendering or fleeing, but by seeing, understanding, and responding. That night she slept with the stars in her mind and the glow of the alien fleet in her memory. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she felt ready. Whatever their intent, she would meet it head-on, with intelligence, patience, and a heart unafraid to seek understanding. And so, surrounded by uncertainty, Princess Leora stood firm, the calm center of her world, a beacon for all who looked to her for guidance. The next morning, Princess Leora awoke with a sense of determination stronger than the day before. The twin suns had barely risen over the horizon when she walked into the palace observation room, her steps purposeful, her eyes fixed on the fleet still hovering silently above Zyphora. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold, yet the alien ships glimmered like shards of crystal suspended in the air, reflecting light in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. The palace had been transformed overnight. Scientists, linguists, and engineers worked side by side, all under Leora's careful guidance. Though many feared the unknown, Leora inspired them to channel their curiosity instead of panic. The observation room was filled with screens, holographic projections, and charts mapping the positions and light sequences of the alien fleet. It was a hive of activity, yet there was an unusual calm. Leora walked among her people, nodding at their findings, encouraging questions, and occasionally pointing out patterns that only she seemed to notice. "Your Highness," said the head linguist, a tall Zyphoran named Farron, "we have noticed a recurring sequence in the lights from the fleet. It repeats every 90 seconds, with variations in color and intensity. We think it may be a form of communication. But it is unlike anything in our known languages." Leora leaned over the projection table, her eyes scanning the flickering sequences. "Not unlike our own signals, perhaps," she said softly. "Think of it as a conversation. Some words are clear, some are subtle, and some are meant to test our understanding. Observe carefully. They are not hiding from us, they are offering a chance to learn." Farron frowned, hesitating. "But what if it is a warning or a test?" "We cannot risk interpreting it incorrectly," Leora smiled. "That is why we watch and listen first. Fear does not teach us, curiosity does, and understanding, true understanding, comes from patience." By mid-morning, Leora had decided that observation alone was not enough. She needed to interact with the fleet. With careful planning, she requested a hover chamber, a transparent vessel capable of lifting off and approaching the alien ships. Her council protested initially. They feared for her safety, for the unknown motives of beings no one had ever truly met. But Leora remained steadfast. She had seen patterns, recognized intelligence, and sensed something familiar in the methodical precision of the fleet. She was certain that a first contact, made with empathy and patience, could open doors that fear could not. The hover chamber lifted gracefully from the palace grounds, carrying Leora above the forests and crystal lakes of Zyphora. The wind of altitude brushed against her face, yet she felt no fear. Below her, the city looked tiny, almost insignificant, but it reminded her of what she was protecting. The fleet stretched across the sky, and as she approached, the ships seemed to react. A series of lights pulsed rhythmically along their surfaces, almost as if they were acknowledging her presence. Leora's heart quickened, not with fear, but with excitement. She remembered the studies she had conducted the night before, the sequences she had decoded, the subtle pauses and variations. She mirrored a small pattern in the air using her hand, a gesture of greeting her people sometimes used when welcoming visitors. Almost immediately, a segment of the fleet responded with a mirrored sequence of lights. It was the first real sign of recognition. Back on the palace grounds, advisors and scientists watched the projections of the chamber's cameras in awe. The lights danced across the alien ships, responding to Leora's movements. It was subtle but unmistakable. Communication was beginning, not with words but with signals, rhythms, and understanding. Inside the hover chamber, Leora spoke softly, almost to herself. "They are curious just like we are, and they are cautious. They do not know us, yet they respond to what they can recognize. That is the start of trust." The chamber hovered closer to the nearest ship. Its surface shimmered with intricate patterns, and Leora realized that these were not just lights. They were symbols, a language waiting to be understood. She carefully replicated the sequence she had observed, noting changes in intensity and duration. Slowly, patiently, she began forming a dialogue of light. Hours passed as Leora and the fleet engaged in this silent exchange. She was exhausted, yet exhilarated. The symbols shifted, changed, and occasionally paused, as if the alien fleet was considering her responses. She realized they were not merely observing, they were learning from her as well. The thought brought a smile to her face. Perhaps intelligence, wherever it exists, recognizes its counterpart instinctively. At one point, a new pattern appeared, one Leora had not seen before. It was complex, almost poetic, with a series of pulsing lights that rose and fell like the rhythm of Zyphora's own twin tides. Leora studied it carefully. She realized it represented movement and choice, a test of understanding. She responded in kind, creating a mirrored sequence, drawing on the intuition that humans possessed in abundance. The lights on the alien ship shifted slightly, paused, and then expanded outward as if acknowledging her answer. From the ground, the palace watchers erupted in quiet excitement. Even the most skeptical advisors could not hide their admiration. They began whispering among themselves about the princess who had not fled, who had not surrendered, but who had met the unknown with patience and intellect. Children, peeking through the palace gates, pointed skyward, calling Leora's name with awe. She had become more than a leader. She had become a symbol of courage and curiosity. As the sun set over Zyphora, painting the sky in violet and gold, Leora finally returned to the palace. She felt a strange mixture of fatigue and exhilaration. The fleet remained in orbit, lights still flickering in complex sequences, but now there was a new rhythm, a subtle harmony with her own signals. It was a beginning. She knew the next step would require even more patience, observation, and empathy. That evening, in the quiet of her chambers, Leora reflected on the day. The alien fleet was not hostile, but it was not fully understood either. They were cautious, intelligent, and capable of learning. The key to peaceful interaction was not dominance, nor surrender, but understanding and adaptability. She realized that the qualities humans possessed, intuition, empathy, creativity, were exactly what made her species uniquely capable of bridging this gap. Early the next morning, she gathered a small team of young scientists, linguists, and technologists. "Today, we do more than observe," she said. "We engage, we respond, we learn, and we teach them that intelligence can meet intelligence without fear." The team worked tirelessly, translating sequences, noting responses, and testing variations. Leora guided them, encouraging each person to see the subtle details, to anticipate patterns, and to respond with thoughtfulness rather than haste. She noticed how humans approached problem-solving differently from the rigid logic of machines or the predictable routines of other species. It was this adaptability, she thought, that made them extraordinary. Hours passed as the hover chamber approached the fleet again. Leora initiated contact with the mirrored light sequences, introducing subtle variations designed to test the aliens' recognition and response. Slowly, deliberately, the fleet responded, expanding the sequences, creating new patterns, almost like a conversation in motion. Leora felt a thrill. They were communicating, learning from each other in a language of light, rhythm, and intelligence. As the day turned to dusk, Leora realized that the fleet's movements had begun to synchronize subtly with hers. It was not imitation, nor obedience. It was coordination, a mutual understanding born of patience and curiosity. She thought of the people of Zyphora, of the children watching from the streets, of the scientists and advisors who had begun to see fear replaced with wonder. They would remember this moment, she knew, as the first true connection with the unknown. Finally, as night fell, Leora returned to the palace, her mind buzzing with possibilities. She had confirmed what she had sensed all along. The fleet was intelligent, cautious, and capable of communication. She had met them not with weapons or threats, but with understanding and creativity. And in doing so, she had shown her people the power of courage rooted in knowledge rather than fear. Before retiring to her chambers, she looked once more at the fleet above. The lights shimmered gently, almost as if acknowledging her efforts. She smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more sequences, more patterns, more opportunities to connect. But for now, there was a sense of harmony, a sense that understanding could bridge even the vastness of space. Leora thought of the lessons of the day. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face the unknown with patience and intelligence. Curiosity was not mere idle wonder, but the first step toward comprehension. And understanding, true understanding, was stronger than any weapon, more enduring than any threat. As she closed her eyes, she imagined the patterns of light dancing across the alien fleet, a silent symphony of connection. Somewhere in that vastness, another intelligence recognized hers. And in that recognition, Princess Leora saw the promise of a future where knowledge, empathy, and courage could shape a universe once thought unknowable. The morning air was crisp and quiet over Zyphora as Princess Leora made her way to the observation hall. The twin suns had barely risen, painting the horizon with soft shades of gold and lavender. From her vantage point, the alien fleet still hovered above, a massive constellation of lights, orderly and deliberate. Their patterns had grown more complex over the past 2 days, and Leora felt a growing excitement. It was clear the aliens were testing her understanding, pushing her to recognize subtler nuances in their communication. Inside the hall, Leora's team of linguists, scientists, and technologists gathered around holographic projections of the fleet. Lines, pulses, and flashes of light danced across the displays in intricate sequences, like an alien symphony of intelligence. Everyone worked quietly, absorbed in deciphering these signals, yet Leora noticed the spark of inspiration in their eyes. The fear that had gripped the palace when the fleet first appeared had been replaced by curiosity and determination. "Today they will test us further," Leora said, her voice calm and steady. She gestured to the projections. "Look closely. Their sequences are changing faster now, but there is still a pattern. They are asking more than observation. They want engagement. They want to see if we can adapt." The team leaned in, examining the pulses. Farron, the head linguist, spoke cautiously. "Your Highness, these sequences are more complex than anything we've seen. They seem to involve spatial reasoning as well as timing. It's almost like a puzzle designed for thought rather than words." Leora nodded. "Exactly. This is not aggression. It is challenge. And challenges are meant to be met with intelligence, creativity, and patience. We can do this together." By mid-morning, preparations were complete. The hover chamber waited outside, gleaming under the early sun. Leora entered, accompanied by a small team of observers and technicians. Unlike the first approach, this mission was more daring. The fleet's sequences had begun to expand across multiple dimensions of light, indicating that the aliens were not only testing their understanding of Zyphorans, but of humans and their companions as well. Leora understood that this was a critical step. She was no longer just a participant in observation. She was part of an interactive dialogue with an entirely new intelligence. The chamber lifted smoothly, gliding above the city and forests. Below, citizens paused in their daily activities to watch the princess ascend. Their faces were filled with awe, hope, and pride. Leora's presence inspired them. It reminded them that courage did not always require fighting, that intelligence could be a shield as strong as any weapon. As the chamber approached the fleet, the alien lights pulsed rapidly, almost in anticipation. Leora mirrored the initial sequences she had learned, introducing subtle variations to test recognition. The aliens responded immediately, expanding the sequences and introducing elements she had never seen before. This was clearly a challenge. The patterns now incorporated movement, intensity, and timing across multiple ships simultaneously. It was a puzzle of spatial reasoning, mathematical intuition, and adaptive thinking. Leora studied the sequences carefully. She realized that this challenge was not simply about following instructions. It required improvisation. The aliens were testing her species, ability to innovate, to apply logic creatively, and to recognize patterns that were not immediately obvious. She smiled inwardly. This was a test humans excelled at, because humans were adaptable and intuitive in ways that no other species she had studied could match. "Notice the rhythm," she said to her team, pointing to the holographic representation. "They are giving us clues, not instructions. Look for the repeated pulses, the shifts in intensity. Understand what they are emphasizing, then respond in a way that shows comprehension and creativity." Hours passed as they worked in real time. Leora directed responses using the hover chamber's interface, translating human gestures into sequences of lights, movements, and timing. Each response from the aliens was like a question, each adjustment a subtle hint. Leora began to notice patterns in how they introduced novelty, using it as a way to measure adaptability. It was exhilarating and exhausting at the same time. At one point, a particularly complex sequence appeared, a series of lights that moved across multiple ships in a synchronized wave, increasing in speed and intensity. Leora studied it carefully. The sequence seemed impossible at first glance. Many of her team's earlier assumptions failed. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking not with calculation but with intuition. The human mind, she realized, could see connections that rigid logic might miss. She responded by creating a mirrored wave, introducing subtle variations that accounted for the speed and spatial movement of the sequence. The aliens paused briefly, then responded with a pattern that expanded further, almost as if acknowledging her solution. Leora smiled. This was the first real recognition of human creativity. It was one thing to follow sequences. It was another entirely to solve problems in ways no other species had done before. From the observation chamber back on the palace grounds, the team erupted in quiet celebration. They had witnessed an exchange that transcended language or conventional communication. Leora had shown the aliens that humans and Xiphorans possessed a combination of logic, creativity, and adaptability that could not be predicted or replicated easily. The hover chamber hovered closer to the central ship of the fleet, a vessel that was larger and more intricate than the others. Leora sensed a new layer of complexity emerging. This ship was clearly the source of the sequences, perhaps the mind of the fleet. Its lights were no longer random or merely responsive. They carried intention, almost personality. Leora realized that this was more than a test, it was an invitation. The aliens wanted not only to see if humans could solve puzzles, but if they could engage in a meaningful dialogue. She took a deep breath and initiated a new response, combining rhythm, intensity, and spatial movement into a sequence that mirrored not just the patterns, but the intent behind them. For several moments, nothing happened. Then the fleet responded with a new, expansive sequence that seemed almost celebratory. Leora's heart leapt. They had recognized her effort, and more importantly, they were responding with creativity of their own. Hours turned into a full day as Leora and the fleet engaged in this intricate exchange. Each sequence became more complex, yet each response from the princess and her team revealed an increasing understanding. She realized that these beings valued problem-solving and learning as much as humans did. They were not enemies, nor were they entirely familiar. They were intelligent, curious, and cautious. As the day came to an end, Leora guided the hover chamber back to Xiphora. She was exhausted, yet exhilarated. The fleet had begun to move in subtle synchronization with her signals, creating a silent harmony that stretched across the sky. It was no longer merely testing, it was cooperation. Back in the palace, Leora gathered her team. Today we have not only observed, we have engaged. They have recognized our creativity and adaptability. That is the power of understanding, patience, and courage. Farron, the head linguist, looked at her with admiration. Your Highness, you have shown them something they could not anticipate. They are responding to humanity in ways no other species has achieved. It is remarkable, Leora smiled. It is not just me, it is all of us. Curiosity, patience, and willingness to think differently, that is what they are responding to. This is the strength of our species. We do not surrender to fear. We face challenges with intelligence and heart. Later that evening, Leora walked through the palace gardens, the air fragrant with the blooms of Zyphora's rare flowers. The lights of the alien fleet shimmered above, a silent testament to the day's achievements. She reflected on what she had learned. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face the unknown with intelligence and creativity. That strength was not in weapons, but in adaptability and understanding, and that leadership was about inspiring others to see possibilities where others saw only threats. She thought about the people of Zyphora, who now looked to her not just as a princess, but as a symbol of what humans and her people could achieve. She imagined the children pointing to the sky, imagining new ways to connect, to solve problems, and to create. The fleet above was no longer a symbol of fear, it was a symbol of potential. That night, as she lay beneath her canopy, Leora imagined the sequences of light stretching across the stars. Each pulse, each movement, each variation was a word in a language without sound, a dialogue of intelligence. Somewhere within that vast fleet, another consciousness recognized hers, and in that recognition she felt a quiet, profound joy. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new challenges, more complex sequences, more tests of creativity, and perhaps a deeper understanding of these beings. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had faced the unknown and responded not with fear, but with curiosity and intelligence. She had proven that humans, with their unique combination of intuition, creativity, and courage, could meet even the most intricate challenges of the universe. And as the stars shone over Zyphora and the alien fleet glimmered in silent dialogue, Princess Leora smiled, ready for whatever the next day would bring. The morning air was crisp as Princess Leora looked out over Zyphora. The twin suns had barely risen, casting soft gold and violet hues across the horizon. The alien fleet still hovered above the planet, but something had changed. The ships no longer seemed like a mysterious force. They felt like beings watching with curiosity, recognition, and perhaps even a hint of respect. Leora smiled, knowing that yesterday's efforts had forged a fragile but important connection. Today, she would build on it. Inside the palace, her team of scientists, linguists, and engineers gathered around the projection table. Holograms displayed the fleet's latest sequences of light, each pattern more intricate than the last. Leora traced her fingers across the display, analyzing the new variations. These sequences are different now, she said. They are no longer just tests. They are invitations, challenges designed to see if we can collaborate, to see if we can learn together. Farron, the head linguist, nodded. It is as if they are offering partnership, Your Highness, but it will require us to think in ways we have never tried before. Leora's eyes sparkled. Then we will think differently. Today, we do not just respond. Today, we cooperate. And when they see that humans and Zyphorans can work in harmony, they will understand that friendship is possible without force. The hover chamber awaited outside. Leora entered with a small team, everyone eager yet aware of the significance of this mission. As the chamber lifted smoothly from the palace grounds, she looked down at the city. The citizens watched in silence, aware that this moment was extraordinary. No one had ever faced the unknown with such courage and intelligence. The stories of Leora's determination had spread quickly, inspiring hope and pride. As the chamber approached the fleet, the alien ships responded with a series of light sequences, pulsing across their massive forms in patterns that shimmered like crystal. Leora noticed subtle differences from yesterday. The sequences were faster, more fluid, and incorporated elements that seemed almost artistic. She realized that the aliens were not only testing logic and problem-solving, they were exploring creativity and expression. "Notice the rhythm," she told her team. "They are creating a pattern that is part puzzle, part art. Our response must reflect understanding and imagination, not just accuracy." The hover chamber's interface allowed Leora to create sequences of light, mapping gestures and movements into pulses that mirrored the aliens' signals. She began to experiment, introducing gentle variations that respected the rhythm while demonstrating originality. Almost immediately, the fleet responded, expanding their patterns in ways that suggested excitement, recognition, and perhaps delight. Hours passed in a quiet, intense collaboration. Leora's team learned to anticipate the fleet's sequences, to create complementary patterns, and to communicate intention as well as response. The exchange was no longer a test. It was dialogue, a silent conversation of intelligence and creativity that transcended words. At one point, the central ship of the fleet, larger and more intricate than the others, projected a complex sequence that spanned multiple dimensions. Light pulses moving across the entire fleet, rising and falling like waves, and converging into symmetrical patterns. Leora recognized the challenge immediately. It was not a problem to solve alone. It required coordination, teamwork, and intuition. She turned to her team. "We must respond together as one mind with many hands. Every person here contributes insight, creativity, and understanding. We can do this if we combine our perspectives." The team worked in harmony, translating individual ideas into a unified sequence of light. Leora guided the final pattern with a careful balance of precision and intuition. For a long moment, the fleet seemed to pause, as if considering the response. Then, in an astonishing display, the ship's lights expanded outward, mirrored the sequence perfectly, and flowed together into a synchronized dance that seemed almost celebratory. The chamber's sensors captured the moment, and everyone inside erupted in quiet amazement. Farron whispered, "Your Highness, they are acknowledging our cooperation. They are responding with what can only be described as joy." Leora nodded, her heart swelling. "They are not just testing us anymore. They are learning with us. And we are showing them that understanding, creativity, and courage are universal qualities." Back on Zyphora, the citizens watched the sky with wonder. The fleet's lights shifted, expanded, and pulsed in intricate patterns that mirrored the harmony achieved by Leora and her team. Children pointed, adults whispered, and even the most cautious advisors could not hide their amazement. A new story was being written in the stars, a story of connection, understanding, and collaboration. By afternoon, the sequences had grown even more elaborate. Leora realized that the aliens were proposing something greater than simple communication. They were inviting Zyphora into partnership. Their patterns suggested shared projects, joint problem-solving, and exchange of knowledge. It was an opportunity unlike any the planet had ever seen. Leora felt a surge of excitement. "This is more than dialogue," she told her team. "They are offering alliance, cooperation, and shared understanding. We must respond wisely, thoughtfully, and with humility. This is the moment to show that humans and Zyphorans can engage in meaningful partnership with another intelligence." They began designing a coordinated response that combined logic, creativity, and intuitive reasoning. Leora guided the team to think beyond mere pattern matching. They introduced sequences that expressed intention, curiosity, and collaboration. When transmitted, the fleet responded immediately, expanding the patterns into an intricate network of lights that spanned the entire sky. It was a visual symphony of connection, demonstrating that communication had transformed into genuine understanding. As evening approached, Leora guided the hover chamber back to Zyphora. The fleet followed at a careful distance, no longer intimidating but accompanying, as if escorting the chamber home. From the balcony of the palace, citizens saw the spectacle, lights flowing across the sky like rivers of energy and understanding. It was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed, a tangible symbol of what could be achieved when courage and intelligence met patience and curiosity. Inside the palace, Leora addressed her advisors and team. "Today, we have achieved something extraordinary. The aliens have recognized the strength of intelligence, creativity, and empathy. We have shown them that humans and Zyphorans can solve problems, communicate, and cooperate without aggression. We have proven that trust and understanding are stronger than fear." Farron spoke softly, awe in his voice. "Your Highness, you have transformed First Contact into a partnership. They will remember this day, and they will know our species as one capable of ingenuity and harmony." Leora nodded. "And they are not the only ones who will remember. Our people will see what is possible when fear is replaced by curiosity, when courage is guided by understanding, and when strength is measured not by weapons but by intelligence and heart." That night, Leora walked through the palace gardens. The alien fleet hovered silently above, their lights reflecting on the crystal lakes below. She thought of the lessons she had learned. Courage does not mean acting without fear, but acting with intelligence. Strength does not lie in dominance, but in adaptability. And leadership is about inspiring others to face the unknown with wisdom and creativity. She imagined the future, a Zyphora working alongside this fleet, exchanging knowledge, exploring new worlds, and discovering possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone. The patterns of light in the sky seemed to mirror her thoughts, intricate, beautiful, and full of promise. As she looked at the stars, she felt a profound sense of peace. The fleet was no longer unknown, nor was it threatening. It was a companion, an opportunity, a reminder that understanding could bridge even the vastest distances of space. Leora realized that the first step in building lasting connection was courage. The courage to face the unknown, the courage to think differently, and the courage to believe in the strength of empathy and intelligence. The citizens of Zyphora slept that night under a sky filled with moving lights, inspired by the princess who had refused to surrender or flee. Stories would be told for generations about Leora, who had faced the unknown with patience and creativity, and who had shown that humans and Zyphorans were capable of achieving what many thought impossible. As the twin suns rose the next morning, Leora stood once more on the balcony, watching the fleet above. The ships shimmered in coordinated light, a testament to the partnership that had begun. She smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. Together, her people and the aliens would explore new horizons, learn from one another, and create a future built on understanding, trust, and mutual respect. Leora felt a quiet pride in her heart. She had faced the unknown and transformed fear into opportunity. She had shown that courage guided by intelligence, empathy, and creativity could turn even the most mysterious challenge into a chance for connection. And in that knowledge, she found not only hope for her people, but a vision of a universe where understanding, rather than aggression, could shape the course of civilizations. And so, with the fleet shimmering above, Princess Leora looked toward the stars, ready for the next chapter of exploration, cooperation, and discovery. Her journey had begun, but the story of partnership, ingenuity, and courage would continue to grow, as limitless as the universe itself. Surrounded by enemies, the alien princess refused to surrender or flee.